Basically, we've made 5 great movies. It's been 5 amazing years. I've had the time of my life. Who knows what the future holds? But all I know is that I'm going to continue playing Spider-Man and having the time of my life. And it's going to be so fun. However we choose to do it, and the future for Spider-Man will be different, but it will be equally as awesome and amazing. And we'll find new ways to make it even cooler somehow.
And the truth shall set you free. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to a very important Spider-Man related video. So in case you've been living under a rock for the past few days, there has been a crazy amount of news relating to the overall future endeavors regarding the MCU's interpretation of Spider-Man. But as you just saw from that intro, we now finally have a definitive answer as to what exactly is going on relating to Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man within the wider Marvel Cinematic Universe. But just as a small recap, this all began from a Deadline report discussing that the overall future of the MCU version of Spider-Man may not be all that grand, considering that there was a huge financial dispute between Sony and Disney. And for all the MCU fans out there, I do understand that you may be a bit upset about this overall news, but I do think you have to try and look at it from the financial perspective of both of these companies. Now, through the most recent financial reports relating to the most recent Spidey film of Spider-Man Far From Home, it did manage to gross over a total worldwide of $1.1 billion. This doesn't just make it the highest grossing Spider-Man film to ever be made, but it's also been stated that this is the highest financially successful Sony film ever created. But before this massive amount of success happened, Sony and Disney were originally within a 95 to 5% deal with the overall gross rates that all these Sony distributed Spider-Man films would make in general. So specifically relating to Spider-Man Homecoming's case, Sony were the main ones to benefit from that film's profits, seeing how that was a film created by them which was simply set within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And while it may have seemed like that this was actually a beneficial deal relating to Sony, they didn't earn any profits when Spider-Man was actually featured within the wider MCU films like that of Captain America Civil War and the other Avengers movies. And all the while Disney remains a multi-billion-dollar company, they reconsidered their original deal of having a 5% stake in the standalone Spidey films that Sony made due to the massive success of Far From Home. Now, even though Sony was trying to consistently renegotiate the deal that they had with Disney, the newest proposition that they made was to try and have a complete 50-50% profit share between the Sony Spidey films. And logically, seeing how Disney already has way more money than they can handle, Sony directly decided to pull out Spider-Man from his involvement within the MCU films. Now, for me personally, even though I think Sony and Disney could have renegotiated their current deal to somehow work for both parties, I completely understand why Sony pulled out of the MCU to save their current profit share. Sony Pictures is a much smaller company compared to that of the massive titanic entity that is Disney. And seeing how they flat out demanded a 50-50% profit share as a take it or leave it scenario was just a bit ludicrous to say the least. And frankly, I do have to give a round of applause for Sony for handling the situation so respectfully relating to all their partners from Marvel and specifically with Kevin Feige himself. Given that Spider-Man won't be within the MCU anymore, it also means that Kevin Feige is being removed as a producer from all future Spider-Man movie projects. So even though this may relate to an unresolved ending relating to Spider-Man's story within the MCU during Far From Home where his identity got exposed, we can at least expect a couple confirmed things relating to the future of Spider-Man in film form. As of right now, we do know that there are 2 more Spider-Man films on the way, and we do know officially as a confirmed fact that Tom Holland is still going to be playing Spider-Man no matter what. The only downside here for the massive Marvel movie fans is that this version of Spider-Man, while still being played by Tom Holland, will not be able to interact with anything regarding the MCU version of the character whatsoever. Even though the majority of people currently see this as a massive bummer with Spider-Man's story not continuing within the MCU, you do have to try and look at it from an analytical perspective. Under the ownership of Disney, we have currently received 2 Spider-Man movies within the MCU along with 3 cameo appearances within the wider Marvel universe. Alongside of that, within the other realms of Marvel related media, we do have 2 current Spider-Man animated series with that of Ultimate Spider-Man as well as Marvel's Spider-Man on Disney XD, which are in my opinion 2 subpar Spider-Man cartoons. But primarily in the case of Sony's previous ownership of Spider-Man media, that's a completely different story. We have received the one and only Sam Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man films as well as some awesome Spider-Man shows with that of Spider-Man the New Animated Series and Spectacular Spider-Man. And obviously most recently with last year alone, we received one of the greatest Spider-Man video games ever made, with that of Spider-Man PS4, which most recently sold 13.2 million copies worldwide, as well as the phenomenal success of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which in fact won an Academy Award for how beautiful that film was in its entirety. And with the nail in the coffin coming from Kevin Feige and Tom Holland directly stating that Spider-Man will not be featured within the MCU in any upcoming projects, we can only hope for the best in his future endeavors. However, this is going to remain a bit confusing, seeing how Tom Holland is going to be playing Spider-Man in the future Spidey films, but will not be connected within the MCU in any way. And while there are rumors indicating that this might mean that we will see Tom Holland's Spider-Man interact with Tom Hardy's Venom in the upcoming Venom sequel or other movies down the line, we don't know for sure whether or not that's going to take effect. So overall, even though I did like certain aspects about Spider-Man within the MCU, I do think now currently under Sony's jurisdiction that they can make something truly extraordinary and more independent for Spider-Man going forward with these feature films. But for all you fans on my channel out there who know what I like talking about the most are probably wondering whether or not this deal between Sony, Disney, and Marvel has anything to do with the video game interpretation of Spider-Man on the PS4. So of course, we're now going to be discussing whether or not Sony's deal with Disney has any effect within Spider-Man PS4's potential future whatsoever, and luckily I'm here to tell you that is not the case whatsoever. The point that I directly see some people trying to make is that Disney directly owns Marvel, which means that Marvel Games is a subsidiary division of Marvel Entertainment itself. And while that may be true to some extent relating to Disney and Marvel's ownership, there are in fact several different branches relating to movie and video game deals which definitely need to be pointed out. Specifically, there is a huge difference between Sony Pictures, which is the main division that handles all the movie-related matters, as well as Sony Interactive Entertainment, which of course relates to the video game industry regarding PlayStation. And wouldn't you know it, the same thing directly applies within Marvel Studios versus Marvel Games, meaning that they are two completely different studios relating to two completely different forms of media. On the one hand, we do have Sony and Disney having a falling out with Spider-Man not being in the MCU anymore due to the financial distributions not meeting either party's expectations. But on the other side of the table, Sony literally just bought Insomniac Games to be added as the 14th company to be featured in the first-party worldwide studios lineup. So essentially, even though we're still a bit unsure as to how the future Spider-Man movies under Sony's jurisdiction are going to turn out, the video game realm of things is looking better than ever. Under the primary guidance of PlayStation's head president of Shuhei Yoshida, who is easily one of the most passionate people within the entirety of the gaming industry, I can say that the PlayStation side of things is looking just fine. Sony Interactive Entertainment easily has some major plans in store for Insomniac as a whole. Whether or not relates to Spider-Man remains unclear as of now, but I definitely think seeing how well Spider-Man PS4 did, both financially and critically, is definitely a good sign indicating that the sequel is most likely already in development. If anything, it's fairly obvious to tell at this point that the sequel for Spider-Man will most likely be a PlayStation 5 title, which will supposedly launch sometime in the fall of 2021. This isn't just because it would fully provide Insomniac ample time to start developing the sequel for the game, but I also think it was also previously leaked back during when the job postings were listed for Insomniac's new hiring positions. And based off the narrative that was happening within Spider-Man PS4's conclusion, with that of teasing characters like Wraith and Venom to be added within the sequel, I can definitely see the next game being bigger and better than ever before. And knowing how well Marvel's Spider-Man managed to sell on one platform alone, making it the highest selling superhero game ever made, I can only imagine what the sequel could do on the PlayStation 5. But still, whether or not you're a massive Spider-Man fan, either relating to the movies or the games, just fingers crossed that everything works out for our awesome webhead no matter what. And with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think about all this crazy news of Disney and Sony breaking up with Spider-Man not being featured within the MCU anymore, and what do you think about the current status of Marvel's Spider-Man 2? For me personally, I think it's almost a guarantee at this point that the sequel is currently in development as of right now, and I definitely think that the movies within the future within the jurisdiction of Sony may just be pretty darn good to say the least. But no matter what happens, I'm just very excited to see what's in store for the future. And until next time, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans, and peace out.
We got to make 5 films within the MCU with Spider-Man, and 2 standalone films and 3 with the Avengers. It was a dream that I never thought would happen. It was never meant to last forever. We knew there was a finite amount of time that we'd be able to do this, and we told the story we wanted to tell, and I'll always be thankful for that.